I think energy is a resource that we can leverage.
Oh, no doubt. I mean,
And
you're preaching to the choir.
yeah,
here.
yeah. But I mean,
we're both heavily involved in mining and
yeah.
the energy space. But yeah, I mean, for AI, for everything, I mean, look at China. I mean, they're like, this is us, and like we got all this woke stuff and all this other crap, and then China's just like, boom.
If we want
Like
to
they're just
win
scaling.
innovation, pick
Yeah.
your battles, and it's going to be AI and it's going to be Bitcoin that are that's the next revolution, and it all starts with the common denominator is energy, and we have a lot of energy resources.
I think Ascent said that in his confirmation hearing. It was like a banger of a clip. It was like, some very liberal senator tried to ask him something about like, oh, what are we doing with green energy with China? They're exceeding us or whatever. And he's just like, it's not a green energy thing. It's an energy thing.
Well,
like,
dude,
they just opened 50 new coal plants or whatever it is. Like,
it's an energy thing, yes,
Yeah.
but also like the cheapest form of energy from a not transition. I mean, it's more expensive renewables, but it's free. The sun is free. The wind is free. The problem is there's a huge capex to go make that happen, and it's unreliable.
It's intermittent,
basically,
yeah.
it's intermittent.
intermittent energy.
But this is actually a way to transition to more renewables as well. If you're increasing, like you think about it, you need to have a reliable baseload to service the regular energy consumption. You can build all flexible energy on top of that. So, I mean, this is a backwards way to like Bitcoin mining, and now we're way out here in the ether, is actually a mechanism to transition towards more sustainable energy
No doubt.
resources
No doubt.
domestically,
I
which
just
is a
signed
good thing.
I just signed a thing with a company, a new startup that's doing small modular nuclear reactors. So they basically they approached me and it was like, hey, like we're going to spin up a 5 megawatt, micro reactor in the next couple of years. Like, will you do a partnership with us if we provide the energy and sell it to you at a low rate? Like, will you buy it? I'm like, fuck yeah.
exactly.
Let's partner up.
Yeah.
You set up your, and I told him, where do you need it to be, sir? I said, well, anywhere the fuck you want to put it. Doesn't matter to me. I can move my containers of miners wherever, right?
Exactly. So to kind of bring it full circle and to piggyback off that point, and even to piggyback off Craig's point, because again, I agree with 90% of what you're saying. I think the question we need to ask ourselves is what leads to a sound economy? What leads to a sound economy is people voting for the right things, right? And so those are the representatives. We need people to vote for those representatives, right? We need people to be informed. And so where does it all kind of dovetail back to? Education, right? And so educating people about Bitcoin, educating people about manufacturing, educating people in different areas of the economy, I think is going to be vital. And moving our education platforms, I think we've seen it during COVID. I think we've seen a transition with Montessori schools and charter schools and different curriculums. I think it's been a good thing for the American.
I mean, the public education system is doing us no favors. So, and they have a vested interest in teaching us certain things and looking at the world a certain way that may not necessarily be optimal for how the world is evolving and changing and the reality of the situation. Right, a lot of it is propaganda.
Why is there no classes in elementary school about how to work mine Bitcoin from your phone? Why is there? These should be the things that should be being taught now. It's transitioning.
I mean, this gets back to the time preference thing again, right? It's education is the ultimate kind of low time preference, endeavor, right? And I think, one of the issues that we have here as a society is this short termism and this idea that the financial markets and the stock market, is a scorecard, and we have to just keep gunning for higher corporate profits, higher wealth for the 1%, and higher stock prices, as if that is the panacea for America. And it's clearly not. It's obviously helping a lot of people, but it's increasingly helping less people. And over time, it's gonna lead to an increasingly larger segment of the populace that's getting more and more screwed and more angry.
It's a French Revolution.
Right.
Right.
And so, we need leaders to recognize that, to speak about it, to think about it, and then also not to be afraid that a risk asset price correction is the worst thing in the world, right? I mean, think about how expensive housing is right here, even right here in Naples, right? I mean, it's, I mean, I own a home, and like, would I be happy if the price of my home fell by 30%? No, but I have a mortgage that was locked in from a long time ago, and would it affect my life at all? No, right?
Yeah.
But, lower housing prices would really actually, help people out.
Yeah.
And so we could get, but part of that's going to be housing supply, right? We need proper legislation to do that. And I think the administration is, thinking more about these supply side changes, but
I mean, a huge part of that is the money that we have that's broken. I mean,
Right,
that's the way I look at it is, people don't want to hold money that the government just continues to print and wastes on all sorts of bullshit propaganda, USAID this, USAID that, all this other crazy stuff that they're doing, right? Wars all over the world. And, that's the mandate that was given, right? That we don't want to be this, we want to, it's going to be a multipolar world, right? Like we're not the policemen of the world anymore. The American people don't want that. We don't want to be in a failed conflict over here, in a failed conflict, 5 trillion, bunch of lives later, a bunch of people, Americans dead, and, $5 trillion later, we're pulling out 20 years later with nothing accomplished. You know what I mean? Like we don't want that anymore. And I think the people voted for that mandate. Like we don't want that, right? So
this idea of low time preference, this idea of behavioral economics, I mean, this is not a new idea. I mean, this is just something that needs to be taught. This is something that people...
Well, I mean, did you read about, did they teach you about Ludwig von Mises at school? Did you learn about Friedrich Hayek? Did they teach you about, I mean, in the public education system, did you learn about any of those people?
No,
you learn about John Maynard Keynes, and that's about it.
Right.
And then they allow you to learn about Milton Friedman. They're like, okay, you can learn about Milton Friedman. He's okay because, he wanted to, he believes in capitalism for everything except for the money, right? So like the money needs to be centrally controlled, right? We have to have the Federal Reserve. We have to control the money, which is like crazy to me.
Right. And that's one of the biggest errors of the Chicago School of Economics is the
You
central
have to-
planning.
but that's why that was why they were allowed to be able to put in the textbooks and all this other stuff is because, for all other goods, we have to have a capitalist free society. But for the most important good in all of society, the price of money, we have to centrally plan that.
It's so funny that I heard a story the other day that John Maynard Keynes was at a conference on economics, and he told a reporter, he goes, "It's funny, I was the only non-Keynesian in that room." And so to see how perverted Keynesian economics has become, it was never the idea of John Maynard Keynes to go the way it's gone.
Part of what he espoused kind of in 1944 at Bretton Woods was the Bancor.
Bancor,
right? It was kind of the original Bitcoin in a lot of ways, and it was this an asset that would be secured, that a multi-currency neutral reserve asset. And that's really what we need. And so countries that have been storing excess wealth in dollars, we thought that was a good. Look, we went off the gold standard and we kind of created the petrodollar system in order to have petrodollars recycled back into America and keep interest rates low, keep inflation low, and then we created the Eurodollar system, and we've continued to create all these systems to keep finding borrowers for U.S. Treasuries to help facilitate U.S. consumption in this high time preference world. Right, everything, and so
I think that's why it was working when China was buying our bonds and stuff. It was like, okay, we're gonna, you can keep selling your shitty little toys here, and we'll let all of our plebs buy it. But like when they stop, seriously,
love that.
And now,
just saying.
Yeah,
I mean,
and then
it's
now,
the truth.
look, now that we're running $2 trillion a year deficits at full employment, the rest of the world's like, the fuck are you guys doing?
Yeah,
cut this, cut it. You're crushing the value of money. You're creating inflation for the rest of the world.
Yeah,
and not only that, but we're also expropriating reserves from Russia.
Yeah,
we're also trying to sanction our enemies, and even increasingly threatening to sanction our allies. Right? I mean, Colombia, the Colombia situation from a couple of weeks ago, like, all of a sudden, like we're threatening them with levies on their holdings of U.S. assets. And look, we may need to get there, but if you're a foreign government, you're like, yeah, I hear you, but maybe we should pull some money back.
Yeah, maybe.
And that's what's going to wind up happening.
Sword.
Yeah.
Well, if you're China, you're licking your lips at what you're seeing of like, okay, cool. Now I can go take over South and Central America. They could be my babies. Like they're on the teat of the United States to some degree, and we're gonna say,
well, they took
off.
over the Panama Canal.
Yeah,
apparently.
yeah, right.
I saw this thing. They were Trump was all mad about it, and then like you go to the Panama Canal, and it's like everything's in Chinese on all the buildings. So he's like, hey, the Chinese are running the canal.
Yeah.
No, they're like, no. And then you go there, it's like every single thing you see is like, it's not Spanish, it's all Chinese.
Canal's a disaster.
They're like, oh, they're onto us. And I saw them with the paint. They had them on video. They're like painting over all the Chinese words and shit.
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
Well, but these allies, like, they are allies. Yeah. And we disproportionately benefit, up to this point. Then when you isolate all your allies, then you don't have any more allies. And you know who's going to come make them their allies, and then they'll disproportionately benefit, at least in the short term, from that, which disproportionately negatively impacts us?
Yeah.
China, right? They're ripe to go be the best friend of all these people that, look at BRICS, right? I mean, that's an example of like countries are rising up and saying, fuck you, America.
Yeah, I guess we'll see how it all plays out. I mean, I definitely see both sides. I mean,
Yeah.
some of these situations, like, again, from that Pomp Letnick podcast, I mean, there's some really, like, unbalanced arrangements that are existing. It's like NATO is a prime example. Like, we're paying majority of that security budget. We don't even live in fucking Europe. We're over here on the other side of the world. Why are you guys not following through on your obligations where you're supposed to put 2% of your spending into military to protect yourselves? Why are we carrying, like, why are we overpaying? And you guys are underpaying, and like what this defensive alliance was to protect Europe, like to protect everything that's happening over there. Like, why are we? So I get where Trump is coming from on a lot of this shit. Like, it makes a lot of fucking sense, and just nobody has any, like, none of these other politicians have had the balls or any idea to actually say, hey, like, we're over fulfilling our obligations, and you guys aren't. So, I think I'm okay with some rebalancing here. Let's figure out where the pain points are. Let's try to get more reciprocity and. Maybe asking nicely doesn't always work. So,
Totally.
hey,
Well,
we're using tariffs or whatever we got to do to get the desired outcome. I don't know.
No, I mean, small wins. We kind of saw 3 small wins in this example with Colombia, Mexico, and Canada. In those examples of just saying, you're like, we're going to play a little bit more hardball.
Yeah.
And that was like over a weekend. And there was a capitulation of sorts.
There was
and
definitely
again,
capitulation.
it's that idea of like win battles. You win a war, but in this example, you don't necessarily want to win the war. You just want to get the rebalance. That's what we're seeking,
and I think that's what we're seeing. So I mean, to James's point, if the tariffs do come into effect, it's probably worse for everybody. But if they capitulate and we get a better deal for America, I think it's actually probably a good strategy.
It's a big if. That's a big if. And what we're talking about is alienating our allies and placing a tariff on Canada and placing a tariff on Mexico, placing a tariff on Colombia. I mean, what you're going to end up, historically speaking, what you're going to end up with is a retaliatory tariff. And then who are they going to go to? You're 100% right. They're going to start siding with Iran and siding with China and siding with Russia. And I just don't see how this turns out good for us.
It's just it's
3
master
for 3 right now, though.
negotiation.
Yeah,
It's
he's
master
3 for 3 right
negotiation
now,
because
so.
like you got to apply a little bit of pain and see how much pain you can apply without getting the break. The break in this
The break is
example
you're
is
right.
they
If we
say,
get the break,
fuck
then
you,
you're right.
like
Yeah.
we're best buddies with Iran and Russia and so on and so forth. That's unrealistic in the short term, but who knows where it could go. So, but we do need to rebalance for certain, and it's working right now in a microcosm, and we've got a lot of tools. We've got a lot of might right now, and one thing Trump is showing is like, I'm not afraid to throw around the power of the United States to use leverage to get incremental wins. It's just a matter of like, well, when does it stop? What's the breaking point? And it's just master negotiation.
Not to be too controversial, but if we want to...
No, say what you... Be controversial, man. Say what you got.
Be extra controversial.
If we want an American example, if we want something that's in our own history, that's not too far long ago, I mean, we could just look at the 40 years leading up to the Civil War.
Get up to that mic, big boy.
I'm sorry. I keep leaning back. I mean, the 40 years leading up to the Civil War, the excise taxes or tariffs that were on the South from the North, which was the industrial center who had a lot of might, was, in my estimation, the reason for the Civil War.
It's not, what's so funny is that Dominic Frisby wrote one of my favorite books. He's one of my favorite authors, and he's going to be here literally next week. We're doing a whole series on his podcast, which is called Daylight Robbery. And one of the chapters is exactly about that. And they don't teach you that in school. In school, it's like, oh, it was to free the slaves.
Right.
But like, Abraham Lincoln was like,
preserve the
he
Union,
won, he
yeah.
literally won his election. I mean, like, at first I was like, oh no, this can't be true. This can't be true. I want to talk to Dominic about this. But like in the book, he has like a quote from Lincoln, and it's like, I'm not going to free the slaves. Like, it's more so like this or that or the other. Like, that's how he got elected, like by basically just kind of like being a politician essentially. And it's like, that's kind of like the rainbows and ponies explanation that they give you in school. Like, it's all about this, but at the end of the day, it's about the tax.
But those tariffs against your allies were exactly what led up to the death of 300 and whatever 20,000 people.
Yeah, no doubt.
In your backyard.
No doubt about it. So yeah, that's going to be a great series. I can't wait to dive into that. But
I mean,
you hit the nail on the head there with that. The question is, like you said, they were implemented. They went into effect. So the question is, if you can get the results without actually implementing, which is what I'm saying, it's like using it as this negotiating tool. Like, oh, fucking Orange Man's crazy. He might actually do this. You know what I mean? Like, and he does have that. Like, that's the way the world thinks of him. Like, this fucking guy's nuts. Like, which is the Mad Max game.
I was going to say. There's definitely folks out who talk about this, the fourth turning and where we are and are we headed for one, a violent one or a peaceful one? And for the most part, fourth turnings have turned with violence.
Violence, yeah.
And I would be I'd be remiss to say this time's probably not different. I mean, we have this record in wealth inequality in America. We have these various powder kegs globally, in a variety of different regions, whether it's China, Taiwan, whether it's in the Middle East, whether it's in Russia and Ukraine. I mean, like there's potential for even larger sets of violence, than not. And so I think we're headed for that turning. Trump is leading us there, and whereas before with the prior administration or the path that we were on, I'm pretty sure we would have gotten there as well, and it probably would have assured a violent fourth turning. I think there's more of a chance now that it won't be because he's willing to kind of break some eggs, like I said earlier. But in the end, it may ultimately, we may just get to the same. We may get to the same exact place, that's unfortunate. But I mean, history repeats, right? So
there's a great quote attributed to Einstein where they asked him, what weapons are going to be used to fight World War III, and he said, "I don't know what weapons are going to be used to fight World War III, but I can assure you, World War IV will be fought with sticks and rocks."
Interesting.
And so, again, you guys are rolling the dice here with, well, let's hope this is a negotiation tactic and doesn't end up blowing back. It's the same way that when we entered the Middle East, we thought it was going to be, we just got to kill the terrorists. What we saw was blowback.
But to your point,
one dead terrorist, we created 4 more.
I like how Trump killed the terrorists last week. He just instead of mobilizing $2 trillion and bringing all of our soldiers on the ground and all this stuff, he just said hey, look, you're in this little cave. We're going to send this little missile, and we're not going to kill any civilians, and boop, boop, you're gone. He even posted it on his his Truth Social account. He posted the little video. It's just they got the little cave in the mountains, and he's like, hey, we located all these little ISIS guys here, and boop, boop, gone. It was like when he walked into that negotiation with the Taliban guy. It was like
Show him the house.
He shows him the picture of his house. I mean, that's fucking savage. I don't care what your political beliefs are. That's fucking savage,
dude, there's we talked about it a little bit last time, but maybe counterpoint to how can you control the breaking point? You can control the breaking point by continuing to have transparent dialogue with those who you're kind of trying to nuke metaphorically. So even if you look at it with our friends, Mexico and Canada, right? We came out and we bashed the stick, and then we said, okay, let's talk about it, right? And if you put that on a larger scale, Trump has shown that he's willing to talk to North Korea,
anybody,
that he's willing to
negotiate.
And when is it bad to have dialogue?
I
right?
totally
And
agree
if
with
you're
you.
having dialogue, you're less likely over enough statistical runs of this to hit that fourth turning. So if Trump people go on Trump, you're boys with Putin, your boy dude, we want to talk to these people
just because we're talking doesn't mean they're necessarily best friends. You know what I mean? Let's have dialogue. There's millions of lives on the line.
Look at the United Kingdom and France historically. They've been at each other's throats for many years, and they've been best friends. They've been at each other's throats. Dialogue keeps it going. So you can apply a lot of pressure so long as you're willing to come to the table and not stonewall it. It's like sending emails. Sometimes you pick up the phone and you just have a conversation. You're I'm negotiating something, and maybe that came off a little rough. We did this recently, actually. We said, let's just fucking pick up the phone and have a call. And then it's okay, the context here is important, that we don't want mutually assured destruction. As long as you're interacting with a reasonable counterparty that does not, and reasonable, the definition of reasonable is I don't want mutually assured destruction. I'm not trying to blow everything up. Then dialogue is good.
I agree.
So I think it's a control mechanism that we have in using tariffs, for example, as a weapon of sorts.
As somebody who has a brother in the SEAL teams, those guys are ready to roll. And I, coming from my lawyer background, I always try to negotiate first. And so exhaust all negotiations is my name of the game. And so if Trump can do that, I fully support it.
I mean, history seems to show us that what he just did has worked, at least for now. I mean, these 3 situations with Colombia and the they didn't want to take their drug dealers back or whatever it was, or their murderers back on the plane. And
Well, how does
they're like,
how
"Oh,
does like
we'll
the
send our
death of
plane to
your
pick 'em up
economy
instead."
sound? And he said, okay, yeah, let him in.
Yeah,
you know?
we'll take them back now.
Yeah,
Well,
you
you know what? We're gonna send our own plane to pick them up.
Carrot
I
and the
love
stick.
that. Yeah, it's like
Yeah, you use the stick and then you
but maybe there
feed
is a
them the
way to
carrot.
get an outcome that is better for both sides, right? Like from a lot of this, like I know it's like Trump's kind of like getting his way right now with certain things, where it's like, hey, they are folding and doing what he wants, but like maybe there's a way where it's like, hey, maybe we're doing something that you don't like, hey, we can fix that. Maybe you got a big old tax on our maple syrup up in Canada. Why don't you knock that tariff down a bit, and we'll knock our other tariffs down.
And you know what Canada has a ton of? Natural resources, right? There's like middle ground right there. Bang. You can find this stuff through dialogue. It's just trading. Everybody has something that
I
somebody
agree.
else wants,
Yeah.
and if you talk through it, you can get there.
Free trade.
Yeah, I like that. Touche. All right. Wow, we've had a fantastic talk so far on just this, but Paul, why don't you put up some takes? And I don't think we're going to get through all 120 of them. We spent about a really long time on just one.
Yeah. Okay.
But
Let's get it rolling.
Let's get a couple takes
So
going.
we've got,
let's get some
you know,
reactions here.
We've got quite the lineup here.
Let's see
So
what we got
we
here.
left off with Craig Shapiro's tweet, which was a fantastic take on tariffs. Got quite the reach, and I think y'all did it justice.
Well, I hope we did. We just raised some different thoughts.
So we've got some political takes. I'm gonna let you decide which one you want to go in on.
You're going a little too fast for me, big dog. I can't read any of those. You're just fucking going by. Start on the first one and just put her up.
All right. So we've got DC Drano here.
All right. What's crazy is that the 2026 midterms are entirely in Trump's control. If he unleashes the FBI and DOJ on election fraud in blue cities, he'll win even bigger majorities in the House and Senate. If he doesn't, he'll lose Congress, get impeached at least one more time, and have a rough 2 years. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously, I think there's tremendous fraud happening all over the place, despite what the mainstream media tries to tell you. So what do you guys think about this?
I'm not that this is in the realm of conspiracy theories, but I mean, look, I think this is something that I think a lot of people just don't want to think about, don't want to talk about. They want to vote for an administration and politicians who they feel like are doing things the right way. I don't think people want to get rehash the 2020 election and the election fraud, and I think people are trying to move on, from this. And so, but I do agree Trump is in control of the 2022 midterms, and I think he's in control of them because he has policies in that he can enact between now and then that have the economy moving in the right direction, that have put people back to work, that has slayed inflation, and momentum on that front is going to be what brings him more power in 2026. And so the question is, how quickly does he get on the path to doing that? And can he tolerate some of the pain short term and early in the administration that will allow those things to get through? Because if you take some pain early, you can blame the previous administration for the issues, right? You can blame Biden, you can blame Janet Yellen, you can blame the Fed for, the short-term recession or the stock market coming in, and that ultimately gets you the things that you need in order to have the economy humming in the summer of 2026.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
And if you don't do that, then you run the risk. Let's say he tries to run things hot and he never lets the economy correct, and we're going to have an inflation problem again at the end of this year and early part of 2026. And then he's going to lose the House, and he's going to lose seats in the Senate. He's going to get impeached again. And then there's going to be no momentum. And then there's going to be no momentum for 2028. And so then he blows the whole thing that he's trying to do. So I don't know. It seems like there's a window here where any pain that comes to the economy, comes to markets, can easily be blamed on the prior administration. And having that pain increases the likelihood that you get what you want in negotiations with House Republicans, with Senate Democrats, with China, with everybody else, because everyone else is suffering from a similar type of pain. Doing it now puts him in control. He runs the risk, if he doesn't do it, that Republicans get booted in 2026 and J.D. Vance is not the president in 2028, and then that's a problem.
I have the luxury of being an MPA, non-party affiliated. And so when I see something like this, politics aside, I think historically speaking, government grows statistically at the lowest rate when we have a Republican president and a democratically controlled Congress. So turning it blue doesn't necessarily scare me. I think that having a little bit
You're saying it grows at the best rate or the lowest
no,
rate?
the lowest rate.
Like government, like
Government grows at the lowest rate.
Oh,
when
I
you
see
have a
what you're
Republican
saying.
versus- yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
if I misspoke there. So a blue Congress doesn't really scare me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we should let it work, let the system work the way it was intended by the founders.
separation of power, all this kind of stuff.
Which, yeah, you'll have.
I think
a
this is.
lock.
I think with what's happening with Doge, this is going to be an anomaly. I think they're going to slash
Yeah,
some serious shit.
The slower government
see.
grows, the better it is, as far as
Yeah.
I'm concerned.
I agree with you,
So,
man.
Yeah, I don't really have much to say about.
I agree. I mean, he controls his destiny. He's the president right now.
Yep.
The best tryout for your next run is what you do right now, and there's plenty of runway.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to just close with my thoughts. You know, having watched everything kind of transpire and occur in these different election cycles, and really going down those rabbit holes. You know, I believe that we should have election day and maybe election night. But when you watch elections go on for weeks and weeks after an election, and people coming in at 4:00 in the morning, and swing state cities are still holding out the votes, I mean, it just really makes you upset with the system. So I think I ultimately want to see some deep forensic analysis studies, et cetera, done on these things. I want to see these ballots that they're fighting so hard not to have people come in and actually look at. I want to see some actual evidence and whether there was fraud or not. I strongly believe with all my heart that there was massive fraud, but if there wasn't, I want to see the forensics behind it, and I want to see it put to the light, which I think is what America is thinking
That's
in
not
general
unreasonable.
with
Reasonable. Yeah, that's
everything, with
reasonable.
the CIA, with the FBI, with the Kennedy assassination, all these different things, aliens, whatever. People just want to fucking know. We want, there's a reason that we are private citizens, and there's they're public servants. I mean, we want to know what the fuck's going on. We want to know where our money's spent. We want to know, what the public, bureaucracy knows. I mean, that's like, we should get to know. So I think people are, whether we're being visited by aliens, whatever's happening, like, we can handle it. We're fucking all adults. We can handle it, right?
Well,
So
I mean,
that's kind of my
You're
thought.
looking for an American glasnost. Is what you're asking for, which is that didn't serve the Soviet Union well when they truth told everything about I mean, it basically broke the whole thing down, right? And so I don't know. Can this country handle the truth?
I think we can.
I don't know.
It's a
I
very
mean,
fair point.
I don't know. I'm open to think. I want to know the truth. I
Yeah.
think everyone on this table wants to know the truth.
Yeah.
But will society, will society handle when it learns more about the COVID vaccine and the truth behind it, and the cancer rates that are accelerating?
Yeah, we're
because
gonna
of it.
see that.
And so, I am a little bit concerned. I mean, look, I think RFK will be an interesting choice, assuming he gets through. Kind of shedding light on truth in pharma, in food, and in other areas. But is this country ready for that? Are the elites and the control and the power structures in media ready for the truth? And I don't know. I mean, it's going to be interesting.
Well, when a lot of people think when you pull back the curtain, you're going to see a boogeyman. You're going to see this conglomerate of these complex ideas and conspiracies and everything else. What I think, if you pull back the curtain on the United States federal government, is what you're going to see is incompetency.
So, like, I would
That's
have.
really what I think.
I think there's definitely going to be a lot of that, but like, I've been on X active the past week, and like Elon and Doge are like blowing the lid off shit. Like, they have got the data, they're showing the connections to different people, and where all this donation and aid money's going, and this is like I said earlier, Hillary Clinton's daughter is getting $84 million in this foundation. Like, where's all this money going? What's happening? I mean, this is massive grift and fraud is what's literally happening. I mean, they're funding. I think one of these takes I saw was like, it shows like mass manipulation or something, like to Thomson Reuters, who's a news agency. I don't know if you can find that one, Paul.
There is a slight difference between like mitigating the problem and having everybody know what the problem was and that it is mitigated, or even forget that there was a problem.
Yeah.
Because of the point of like, I'm just trying to be devil's advocate here, kind of along the lines of what you said, like, fixing the problems are the most important thing. The second most important thing is making everybody aware of the problem.
Yeah.
Can people handle? Can everybody in this country
I
handle?
think everyone's
that?
kind of already known what's been going on, but like just to
Maddie.
be able to see it out there, what's going on?
I don't know.
Is
It's tough
this
one.
the post you were referring
Yeah.
to?
So like 48 vCPUs. So they were just trying to crunch all these numbers and figure out where's all this money going. So this guy's amazing. This Data Republican, small. I think he says small R on his thing. But like the USAID grant thing is like wild where all of our tax dollars are going to, fund all these psyops and, cause regime change, and to all of these different people in office who are like have their net worth is like $100 million, but the annual salary is like 200K. Like
Nancy Pelosi.
like she should lead our fucking sovereign wealth fund. I saw someone fucking
we could tank it
comment
right
on that.
now.
It's like, and everyone was like, holy shit, that's actually a good idea. Like she really fucking should. But basically they're like going through, digging through all the data and finding, where all this money's going. And like this guy's been putting this out like every day, like just different things of like showing like all these senators, and like they've got their little pet foundation and it's getting like $100 million. I think they did like Chuck Schumer and all these guys, and like these guys, it's wild. But they're actually digging into it. So kind of interesting.
I want to play you this short clip from a post that Dave Smith put out just on this subject of transparency
Love
and
my
of
boy Dave.
There's Chelsea Clinton right
he's
there.
awesome. USAID, right? The whole paradigm shift that we're experiencing. Essentially, the tables have been turned, and that's what Nicole Shanahan was telling him. If this will ever load.
Well, if we didn't have 5 million tabs open, it might load. But
Goodness, I had it pulled up here. It's lost in the shuffle.
yeah. So why did USAID give 68 million?
All right, here we go.
Dave Smith is a national treasure.
Crimes
he is.
committed against the American people from these power centers that now
Can
you have
hear this clip. Were you able to hear that?
powerful
could hear-
people
yeah, we
who
can
are
hear it.
really, and I must say, probably legitimately scared to death that somebody might open the books and expose what they've been doing to the American people. And that's one of these things that's tough to brush aside.
Yeah, I mean, look at just the news today. USAID, hey, funded bioweapons research, gain of function research, links to COVID origins. It is incredible that we now have the ability to data mine the government. Yeah, they've been data mining us mercilessly for years and years and years against our very liberties. They've been mining us, and the tables are flipped.
There have been
Yeah, she hits
such
the nail on the head.
crimes committed against the American
I mean, that it's way worse than you thought it was. Like, then we all kind of knew that there were the corruption and the grift and how they were doing it, but they're like literally taking taxpayer dollars, giving it to media organizations to censor what they don't want. I mean, this shit is unbelievably like corrupt and obviously blatantly unconstitutional. But yeah, I mean, a lot of these people should probably, I know this is a radical thing to say, but like these people, like, I think a lot of them need to go to jail or like, something more serious. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, I think that maybe there's some fear from maybe someone on the left that Trump and the Justice Department will use this as a way to just really come after his political opponents, right? And just the grift and the stealing on the left. I gotta imagine that there is a similar amount of fraud and grift coming from folks who are in positions of power on the right as well.
Yeah, I mean,
and so
the
small
small Republican did one on.
and so
couple of
as
them
long
today.
as there's an equal an equal playing field here about who we're coming after on this, I think that is the right thing to do. I'm concerned that just given who Trump is and given kind of how he deals with political opponents, it's going to be a little bit more partisan, and then it kind of adds, it puts a little bit of a stain on what he's trying to do, and then you kind of start worrying about, how much power does he have, and we joked earlier, is he going to run for a third term, right? And then we start to talk about these types of things, and they get romanced in far right media those ideas wind up bubbling up, and then we're talking about things that are kind of unnecessary. But
And then you set the precedent, right, for who comes in 2020.
I mean, the
or
precedent's been
2028.
set. They literally went through the former first lady's underwear drawer, raided his place with shit that they knew he already had that he was storing down there because he had been in communication with them about it for forever. They, funneled money to all these fucking clowns that were suing him. Like, they took people from their administration and the Department of Justice, put them in, like, hey, you go to the New York district, you go to Washington, D.C., which is, like, vote 98% Democrat. Like, New York City, like, 98% Democrat. Like, Fulton County, Georgia was the other one, where they're, like, 93% Democrat.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's, like, hyper partisan, total corruption, going after your political opponent who's literally leading you in the thing. I mean, the precedent has been set. they try to throw him in jail for like hundreds of years with some of these charges. I mean, he's obviously got his flaws and his problems, and he probably screwed that fucking Stormy Daniels chick or whatever. But I mean, like,
I don't even think he's debating that.
Well, I think he is. He's like, I don't know
It's just
this
how he
woman.
paid her.
I've never
It
seen her
was
before in my
just
life.
the funds and the
Yeah,
legality
yeah.
of the flow of
Yeah,
funds.
like
They
a-
banged, that's
Yeah.
for sure.
It probably happened, yeah. I don't know, but all I'm saying is, like, they changed the statute of limitation laws in New York to go after him for a crime that was, they got the civil lawsuit with this woman who's living in the woods who's clearly mentally ill, trying to, he got me in a room and 40 years ago, and you're in a hyper partisan like jury where there's like 98% everybody thinks the same way. I mean, like, to me, that's just totally corrupt, totally crazy. So that precedent has been set, right? Like, that's my thought. Like, so yeah, we need to break that precedent. Absolutely.
Well, it takes a strong leader to be able to be like, you did this to me, but I'm not going to do it to you.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going to be the bigger man in this case.
It
like,
reminds
I'm
me
going to
of-
do it to you, but I'm going to do it to the people who,
Yeah.
I'm going to do it to the me as well kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, Trump pisses so many people off because of what he says, but he doesn't actually do half the shit he says. I mean, he's like a reality TV star. He's like a comedian kind of guy, and it just people aren't used to that in politics, so it just rubs people the wrong way. I remember when he said, like, he had that banger in Hillary Clinton, I think it was like 2016 or whatever. She said something like that, and he goes, well, if you were in power, blah, 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 like, I would never do this. And he said something like, oh, that's because you'd be in prison. Like, everybody laughed. Like, I clearly won the debate. Like, it was a mic drop. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but we all laughed because we're like, of course he's not going to put his political opponent in prison. And then, like, 4 years, he didn't do that.
Yeah.
He could have, but he didn't when he had power. And then 4 years later, that's exactly what they're trying to do to him. I mean, that's wild, in my mind, I thought it was very wild. So, I was kind of like, to me, this election was probably one of the most consequential ones I've ever felt in my life. Obviously, because the previous administration has been prosecuting our industry with the choke point, the SEC, all this type of shit. So there was that element of it. Then there was the blatant, in my mind, total corruption going after political opponents, Banana Republic type shit. So yeah, I mean, for me, I really fucking felt this one. I was like,
I got a
orange.
question.
We got to get the orange man back.
I got a question for the three of you because I mean, there was a question about election fraud earlier. In the sense that Trump came back and won handily in 2024.
Yeah.
Did that do anything to kind of quell your concerns about election fraud? Do you think it was just
Absolutely not. I think he just ran up. Pennsylvania, they were already trying to do it in like some of these. I was watching. I wasn't going to go to sleep because I remember being on like the betting site the night that he in 2020, and like he was at 99% on all the Vegas betting sites because it was like there's no way. Like they went on and there wasn't enough votes left in Georgia for him to lose Georgia. Like one of the guys was on TV saying that, like, yeah, we're gonna wrap up soon. There's only a couple 100,000 votes left, and Trump was up by over that margin. So it was like even if all those votes went for the other candidate, he couldn't have won. And then just watching this whole thing play out over weeks of like, oh, we're still counting, and oh, the people coming in at 4 a.m. and blocking the windows and all this crazy shit that was happening, all of the mail-in ballot fraud. They caught these fuckers the last day in Pennsylvania trying to stuff 6,000 fake ballots in. This far left organization that did it out of Arizona. I mean, I went down this fucking rabbit hole, dude. And the more I went down this fucking rabbit hole, I was like, oh my God, this shit is fucking crazy what they're doing. And they're getting away with it. No one, who's going to stop you? You run an election once every 4 years. I mean, it's all over the place. I mean,
My question though would be, why is it that not one circuit court judge has found anything where they've been able
no
to prosecute?
No standing. They're kicking the can. There's a guy who's sitting on this fucking case in Georgia right now in Fulton County, won't let the fucking ballots be examined from 5 years ago. They're supposed to keep those ballots, and he's just not hearing the trial. He's not hearing the case. So, I mean, there's some crazy fucking shit going on, dude. It's crazy. So I would like to see some justice for all that because in my mind, it's a wild one. And I think that's probably why he's been so, I mean, he's very adamant about it. This probably always happens in every election. You know what I mean? Like, but he just was like, not going to take it. He was not going to have it. And like, it was wild. And I thought it was like crazy. And the more I looked into it, the more it's like all these things. It's like all the people screaming about the COVID thing, like, oh shit, another conspiracy is proven right. Another conspiracy is proven right. Another conspiracy is proven right. I mean, it's a mass fucking psyop, dude. Like they seriously, I mean, like they had to hold back those votes to fucking stuff those boxes for like 7 to 10 days after the election, maybe 2 weeks in some of these places. And like, oh, we're still counting. We don't know. We're still counting. I mean, that's like fucking that's some third world shit you see. Like we should know on election night who fucking won the election. The fact that we don't, like the next day may be ridiculous. That, I mean, in America, that's crazy. We can't audit. We can't actually see. All that shit should be on a fucking blockchain. Like
It
we
really
should be able to
like,
see.
yeah,
I mean,
this should be an easy problem
yeah,
to solve.
it is an easy problem to solve,
Yeah.
but they don't want the problem solved, right? That's the problem, right? They want to be able to run all these games and do all this bullshit and, have entire, swing state cities where they hold the votes, for days after when they figure out, okay, they won these counties. How many more do we need to come up with and fucking coming through the back? I mean, wild. But yeah, I mean, there is a lot. I mean, if you really start to dig into it, it's fucking wild. It's fucking wild. But they did prove it this cycle. They caught those fuckers on the ground trying to stuff in 6,000 fake registrations. So there was a news story about it, at least, from what I saw. So again, I've gone down this fucking rabbit hole, man. But Jeffrey A. Tucker, this is an interesting one. I keep hearing whispers that Trump is acting like a tyrant, but this is sloppy and ahistorical thinking. The powers he is using and the orders he is issuing are mostly aimed at government power, guaranteeing free speech, stopping legal privileging, stopping spending and hiring and regulating, and even stopping the use of government power to use demographics to manipulate elections. This is what the president is supposed to do, according to the Constitution. He is supposed to be the manager of executive agencies. That no one has done this so aggressively in 100+ years just shows you how lame have been the people elected to this position.
Yeah, I think that's a good and accurate take. These are good things. I think it's just Trump he kind of gets in his own way a little bit when he goes off the cuff, like all of those things, policy decisions, actions, those are good. And those are things that a president should be doing. But then when you get up there and you call people names or you just kind of start taking low shots, it
It's not
discredits it.
presidential. Yeah, it's not
Well,
presidential.
it's not that
That's
it's
the
not
idea.
it's not that it's not presidential. It's like it's kind of forget the president. It's just like a discrediting way to act as a human being. So it's like, and maybe that's part of why he's so effective because he's such a bully, right? And maybe
It's a double-edged sword.
It is, but I think that's where a lot of like, if you ripped it out and you just looked at here are the policies on a piece of paper, I think like an overwhelming majority, we got an overwhelming majority, but a more overwhelming majority would be like, okay, this is good. But then when it's the person saying it is like making fun of, mentally disabled people or doing, calling somebody this name or that name, you're just like, fuck, that's just a bully on the playground being a dick. And it kind of discredits it. It's a double-edged sword. It's
Yeah,
an
I think
interesting one to
it's-
unpack. Maybe that's part of his superpower.
That is,
but
it's part of it's his greatest weakness and his greatest power.
I know,
in
but
my
it's
opinion.
fucking annoying.
Do you want to hear Bernie back in
Oh, here.
2015? Or should we just read this
Open
take?
borders. That's a Koch. Was it the Koch brothers proposal, which essentially says there is no United States. It would make everyone in America poorer. Right-wing people would love an open border to bring in all kinds of people to work for $2 to $3 an hour. Bernie Sanders in 2015. So it looks like he's obviously changed his take, probably, right? So I know James, you had some interesting thoughts on the border situation and everything. I think you posted a little bit about that as well. What are your thoughts now?
Yeah, I mean, to basically summarize and not to go because this could be another 4 hours.
Oh, this will be a 4-hour conversation for sure.
But yeah, if the government, if the United States Postal Service is operating at a $5 billion deficit every year, why is it that we think that the federal government's doing a good job patrolling the border? And so I guess my idea, and going back to Professor Walter Block, he has a great quote. If it moves, privatize it. If it doesn't move, privatize it. Since everything either does move or doesn't move, privatize it. And so I think privatizing the border would do a much better job than the federal government in both enforcement and in immigration policy. I think our immigration system is completely broken. If we're going to talk about financials, we also have to talk about the immigration because that is obviously a huge part of it. But yeah, I struggle to say that I am a completely open borders person. But I do believe that it should be controlled by private industry rather than by the
But
government.
what's the financial incentive there? Because obviously, like, how do they make money? Like, that's my question. So,
Well-
in my mind, like, the government should do like one or two things, and that's like, national security is like one of those things, in my opinion. Like, so that is like their one of their very few jobs that they have, right? So, like, in my mind, it's like how could you privatize that? Because who's going to pay? That's what I'm just trying to figure
Well, you're
out. Like,
paying
what's the
anyways.
financial incentive?
It's just the
Yeah.
effectiveness of the body that's enforcing what you're trying to accomplish.
I think it's
So
almost like a
there's-
military thing. Like we have the best military in the world, right? Like that's because
That's-
we're
that's-
America, right? So I
that's
feel
a-
like that's kind of an extension of that.
That's reasonable, but I think like the question of can you create incentives that get better outcome, you can always do that in with private entities. I think like how many people you catch, how many. I'm being facetious,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
like
yeah.
there are ways to do it, and we're already spending,
Yeah.
right? It's like we would spend less on internal resources, taxpayer dollars, or maybe you spend the same, but it'd be more effective from an outcome.
Let's say you're the Department of Homeland Security, or let's say you're the Department of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. You have a budget, right? And so what would be the quickest way for you to pad your budget and to get more money into the coffers of whatever you're trying to accomplish? Create a boogeyman. You say, this is the reason, Joe America, this is the reason why you didn't make as much money this year. Or this is the reason why your dollar doesn't go as far. It's this guy coming over from Honduras. And you point to that and you say, okay, well, all we have to do is stop the flow of this low-wage immigration coming across the border, and all your problems will be solved. And what do people do? They send billions upon billions of dollars to these federal agencies, and these federal agencies spend this money like there's no tomorrow. And so how does the federal government make money off it? Because we vote for it. And how do we vote for it? Because we think there's a huge problem. If we look at the economics behind immigration historically, again, I'm going to go back to the historical argument. Immigration, especially in the second and third generations, not the person maybe who comes over, but the children that they have and the children that they have give way more to the economy than they take out in benefits.
So you're saying that, I mean, because what's happening in the past 4 years, I mean, it wasn't like a natural thing that happened. Like they're looking into this now and like they're exposing all this. Like they're taking taxpayer money and funding all these NGOs that are turning around and helping facilitate this mass migration of across the border, further drain on resources in cities and places like that. At least the first generation. Your argument is like second, third generation later, maybe they'll contribute more to society. But like right now, like they're coming in and they're in hospitals, schools, taking over gyms, and this is not even natural. This is a resettlement that is being facilitated by our taxpayer money. So we're paying to do this. To me, this is absolutely insane, and the people should have a say in that, right? Not it being hidden through NGOs and webs of grift and fraud. We paid like some Lutheran church $200 million every couple months to do this. I mean, like obviously massive fucking fraud is occurring. There's a massive grift occurring here. So like I'm kind of with you where it's like, hey, our immigration system is broken. If people want to come and they want to pay to come and they want to fucking figure it out to walk and do whatever, come to a place and like we'll figure out a way to like make it simpler so they can come if they pass the thing or whatever. You fill out papers, whatever. You get an actual ID. We know who you are. You pass you're not a fucking, murderer or criminal like what the 500,000 that actually came in the past 4 years. Literally 500,000 criminals came across the border.
Why is it, to your point, Matt, why is it that we can't go back to a simplified version, an Ellis Island style version of a criminal check, background check, a disease check, and here's your social security number? Now
I don't disagree with that. I think that's actually, hey, but as long as I'm not facilitating that through, shady NGOs where millions going here, millions going to the cartel here, we're doing this, the pastor's getting a couple mil, all this crazy shit, that's what's actually happening with my own taxpayer money. Sure. So like I'm actively against what happened the past 4 years, making an app so they can, all this crazy shit. Like I'm against that, right? But what you said, yeah, for sure. I think, we need to simplify it a little bit more, right? Like let the free market kind of figure it out if they want to come and do it. But the mass resettlement on my dime that's occurred the past 4 years, I'm totally actively against. And the gaslighting and the lying and the doing all this shit, like there's not a problem. And, actively, not letting the people on the border do their jobs. I mean, crazy, craziness.
Well, the other argument is that these people are coming to achieve welfare benefits, that they're coming here to live off the government dole. And what that shows is it's just,
I mean, they're not coming for that reason. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like they're not like, oh, I'm going to go get a bunch of benefits. But like when you take a bunch of fucking Haitian people that don't speak English and you park them in a small rural community in the middle of nowhere on the taxpayer dime, of course they're going to be consuming resources from the community. There's, medical care. You can just go to the emergency room and get free healthcare, right? We'll send you a bill. Yeah, it's a fucking outrageous bill, but 99% of people don't fucking pay the bill. Right. So like, I mean, they go to the school system. They're, they're in gyms that taxpayers have paid for. And like I feel like you can't have it both ways. Like if you want to have this free and open thing, you can't have a socialized system that fucking pays for it
so
all.
you sound like Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman said you can't have open borders with a welfare state.
That's how I feel, yeah.
What the data has shown since Milton Friedman has passed is that we've seen, with greater rates of immigration, we've seen a better economy. And when we see it, and the reason for that is because the more producers you have in an economy, the better your economy is to grow. And so not only do we have more producers, but the flip side to that would also be we have more consumers. And so the more people you have in the economy and the more people you have contributing into the economy by working, and again, you hit the nail on the head. These people are usually coming across. They're not competing with you and I. They're not competing for doctor jobs and finance jobs. They're competing for low wages. And that, to me, historically, has been a good thing for the American economy. And so this idea of the boogeyman, and I agree with you that it shouldn't be taxpayer funded, shouldn't be bringing them over, and shouldn't be funding NGOs.
That's what's been happening. I mean,
I agree. And when I say privatize the border, just to kind of summarize this, and I'll stop talking after this. But what I mean is, why do we have a government border? Why is it not that those are private citizens that own the land on the border, and they can make a decision whether or not they want to hire the guy from Honduras to come and work their land? Or if he wants to go across their land and into a 7-Eleven and buy a pack of smokes, why is it my job or the government's job to tell him he can't do that?
I mean, I guess my thought on that would be like, why do we even have nation states then? Why do we have, any kind of state? I mean, in my mind, like if you have a state or, a country, like that's their one fucking job, like protection, like protect your citizenry. Like in my mind, that's like the main thing that comes up. Like, your one role, the one thing that like I don't mind sending my tax dollars for is like, let's have a military so we can defend. Let's fucking, let's have an actual border so I don't have like fucking some murder coming across killing my daughter. Like there's all these stories about these illegal aliens that have come across and totally slaughtered people.
Right,
and
but
done all
those are the
sorts of
exceptions. Those aren't the rules.
I hear you. I hear what you're saying. I do hear that argument, but it is a substantial amount, and there is a substantial amount of crime that has come with that, right? So I have no problem simplifying the system, but there should be some system. There should be something there. My personal opinion is one of the few roles the government actually should do is that, in my opinion. But I recognize where you're coming from.
I understand what you're saying. And again,
Yeah.
I think we agree on a lot more than we're going to disagree on.
Yeah.
My whole thing is that I do not believe that if it's important, the federal government should be in charge of it.
Well, they are in charge of the most important thing, which is our military, right? Like but I hear when it comes to everything else, I generally agree.
I actually wrote my undergrad thesis at AVE on privatizing police, military, and the court system.
Really? That's amazing. That's amazing.
So I'm a little biased when it comes to
Okay, all right. No worries. Hey, I hear you. Vivek. The biggest threat to capitalism is crony capitalism. I agree. A lot of people attribute like a lot of these, big corporations and all this stuff. They're like, oh, this is capitalism failed. Like that's not real capitalism. That's like total crony capitalism where they've like bribed all these politicians and have all these moats and fake laws they put into power. But what do you guys have on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that capitalism in its own concept is good. And we talked about this, Maddie, last time we were here, where it's kind of like this power threshold. I think we actually used Elon as the example where, the quest begins noble. And let's not use him as an example here, but the quest begins noble. The system of capitalism is good. But then when you start to reap the benefits disproportionately of that system and you have more power, then it's kind of like you cross the line a little bit. Now you're crossed that line, and then you cross the next line, and then you cross the next line, and you forget where you started and what the ultimate endeavor was, and that leads to crony capitalism, and that's bullshit, and that will blow up.
Paul, can you go back up for a second just to the tweet above that?
Definitely.
Yes, the great virtue of a free market system that does not care what color people are, does not care what their religion is, and only cares whether they can produce something you want to buy. So that kind of ties into the immigration argument as well.
That's a Milton Friedman quote. Yeah, it is the most effective system we have discovered to enable people who hate one another to deal with one another and help one another. Yeah, I think he hits the nail on the head.
And whenever somebody has a critique of capitalism, I think the word, obviously Karl Marx coined it, they're talking about crony capitalism.
They're not talking about real capitalism. They're talking about crony capitalism, yeah.
The other problem we have is we have, capitalism for the poor and socialism for the rich with respect to,
absolutely.
when
shit
when shit hits the fan, right? And businesses are not allowed to die. The banks are not allowed to die.
Crazy.
The government comes in and prints the money to keep companies alive. And so, that was the second quote on there, something about fiat money. But I mean, that's something that is a problem. And it is exacerbating wealth inequality. And we're at, this late stage capitalism phase where less and less people are thriving in our version of capitalism.
Yeah.
And it has a lot to do with
the cronyism,
the cronyism, but also and
fiat money printing.
I would put fiat money printing in the category of cronyism in a lot of ways because the politicians are bought. right? They're bought by various, vested interests or elites or banks or whatever it is, and they basically force them to pass laws to keep them to keep themselves in power and to keep these people wealthy. And so that creates issues, and companies then go in and fire workers when things are bad, and the workers kind of keep getting screwed.
It reminds me of, I think it was Friedrich Hayek when they founded the Federal Reserve. He said, "Look, you're going to create a really, when you have a fire in a forest and you don't let the small fire come through and cleanse it out, like you're going to have a great big fire, and it's going to be really bad. It's going to be way worse, right?" So, Friedrich Hayek said that. It was like, don't do this. Don't do the Federal Reserve. You're not going to allow the natural cycle to cleanse itself. You're going to kick that can down the road, and then what did we have? The Great Depression, right? So he kind of called that and said it's going to be way worse. And then that Great Depression came after the Roaring '20s.
But this is what I see with tariffs. I see tariffs as a crony capitalistic measure.
Yeah.
Where you're central planning the economy. You have Donald Trump or whoever in the regulatory agencies that says, "Oh no, we know better than letting the invisible hand of the market work and cleansing the forest in many ways."
That's true. Yeah, but going back to the tariff thing on that, it's more like it's just a tool to use to get out of the hole. Right. So I totally agree with the fact that everything you just said, that it's not free market and it's not the most effective long term, but it's kind of a short term gap to like rebalance stuff and then let it rip. Maybe. I don't know.
I like the idea of the national security element of like saying, hey, we're going to provide, we want to have some. This is a critical industry, right? Like you said, 43,000 industries, obviously not critical industries, but like there are a couple things that are critical that we probably should say, hey, we need this to happen. We need to make some motive for this to be produced here. So to me, that makes sense. As the government's one job is national security, which is what I think their job should be, right?
But back to the criticism about the central bank. I mean, part of the problem is the Fed, right? And the Fed says it's not political, but it's entirely political because it never lets the market set the price of capital to then come in and force the government to think about balancing the budget or spending less, right? Every time the Treasury market shows any bit of dysfunction, the Fed comes in and prints money. And so Congress and DC at large say, you know what, like we have no risk of running up ridiculous deficits forever because the Fed has our back. And that's political, right? Because there are certain segments of the economy, asset owners, homeowners, banks, that really thrive and benefit from that environment. And then there are parts of the economy, the poor, renters, et cetera, that keep getting screwed by this.
Sounds like you're describing the Cantillon effect.
So that's the that's part of the issue with capitalism. But it's really this end the Fed kind of concept that gets tossed around in the Bitcoin community a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of legitimacy to it. We've been talking about it for since its creation.
If you think about it, it just makes perfect sense. Well, we don't centrally plan the price of eggs or milk or anything like that. So like, why the fuck would we do it for the most important thing in society, which is money itself?
So I guess with respect to tariffs, it's like if we're not going to end the Fed, even though we should, then this is a way to kind of, in some ways, it's taking some power back, maybe from what the Fed is doing, and giving it to the administration to try to push policy and push the economy in a direction that it seems fit. Now, you may say, well, they're hypocritical. They're only going to do what they want to do to enrich their interests, and that's possible. And we may ultimately be sitting here later, and Trump has made Elon even wealthier, and Bezos and every other billionaire that sat in front of the cabinet at the inauguration, which I thought was a horrible look. But maybe it won't, right? Maybe there will be some more talk about the common man and the working class and the like. And this is tariffs are just a tool to help do that, because the Fed is out of play, right? They're not doing anything to eliminate wealth inequality issues. They're just they're exacerbating the wealth
Like I said,
issues.
if you were going to end the Fed, if you were going to abolish the income tax, and you were going to replace it with tariffs, I would be on board with you guys.
I'm totally on board with that. That sounds like a great plan.
That sounds like a great plan.
I think we're just we're compounding the problem by adding tariffs.
Wasn't that like that was how it was in America from like what, the 1800s, the 1900s?
Well, yeah, when
like,
Andrew Jackson, he abolished the central bank.
The most, I think it was the wealthiest period, or like the most wealth creation that ever occurred was during that period. I can't remember what the age was called, but I think it was from like the late 1800s to like the early-ish 1900s or something like that. It was
and what wound up happening during those periods of time is we had very short panics, right? We had banking panics, and what wound up happening is banks went out of business, some consumers lost money. Capitalism kind of reset itself quickly, and we thrived again. And to your analogy from earlier, it's like when we keep putting out the fires before we have before we have the big one, then like
well, you
eventually-
take more risk.
You don't let the little one happen.
we don't
you
let
have,
the-
you have
yeah.
the mother of all
Right.
fires.
Yeah,
You know, you don't
exactly.
let the brush clear itself out naturally. With a little fire, you end up with
It-
that brush
it
just
is-
growing and growing and growing, and that's where we're at. I mean,
Well, it incentivizes bad behavior. Somebody told me
you're
this example.
exactly right.
It's like if you're at a blackjack table and you're splitting tens every time.
Mhm.
Like book says don't do that. But if you know that somebody's got your back and you're just going to get another, reload of chips because you're out of chips, you're going to split tens every time. You're going to go for that black. You're going to go for that 21. What's a 20 when you can have a 21?
So does the book actually say to don't split tens? What if the guy's like what if the dealer's showing a 2 or a 3?
You never split
You
tens.
never split. The book
Yeah.
says never split. Wow, I'm just curious. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the game is rigged regardless.
A deeper analogy would be like the dealer's showing a 10 and you've got tens and you're going to split them because you can get 2 aces and beat it. And
Yeah.
why not go for the win if you know that I'm not going to lose?
Yeah.
You'll take that risk every time.
Mhm.
And then it incentivizes that sort of behavior. That's the Fed.
Was
There,
it
he
the
looked it up.
Gilded
The
Age?
Gilded Age. He looked it up. The period you're referring to is often called the Gilded Age in the United States, which roughly spanned from the late 1860s to about 1900. However, there was no instance during that time where the Federal Reserve was shut down because the Federal Reserve didn't even exist
Yeah,
until 1913. So
There's no
I
central.
think you might
there was no,
have-
there was no
yeah,
central.
there was no
bank
central
during that,
bank.
Right.
yeah, the central bank was established in 1913.
But there was a banking panic in 1873. There was a
Yeah.
banking panic in 1907, and we did okay.
Yeah.
We kept kind of going. Kept kind of
Yeah.
moving along.
And ultimately, a lot of these panics, I mean, all the stuff that was happening was because, in my opinion, the failure of gold to be sound money in a lot of ways. It's not divisible. It's not, that divisibility problem really made it hard to transact with. If you wanted to use small value transactions, what are you going to chip off a flake of gold to give it to them, right? It's
Well, then it becomes less real too because you
Yeah.
feel like what you're actually transacting in is this paper that's backed by gold, and then
Yeah.
again, like the line keeps getting further and further
Slowly
and further.
growing
Well, we
fraud,
already
yeah.
use this paper,
Yeah.
so maybe we just make a little bit more paper,
Yeah.
and then a little bit.
Well, a lot
more
of banks
paper,
actually
and then
did
a
that. They-
shitload
yeah,
more
yeah.
paper,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think Bitcoin kind of takes a lot of gold's best characteristics and evolves on that, right? Which is why it's such a powerful, the best performing asset in all of human history. I mean, hard to argue with
No
that.
argument here.
Let's see. Real Spike Cohen. He's a good one. I'm sure James
You guys
will love
have
him.
all libertarians on this.
Government fought the numbers game, then introduced the lottery. It fought Ponzi schemes, then introduced Social Security. It fought organized crime, then introduced the FBI, civil forfeiture, and qualified immunity. Government doesn't fight crime; it fights competition. I love that take.
Same thing with immigration. I mean, they create the boogeyman, and then they create these federal agencies to combat it.
That's a good full circle example of that. I think totally.
Government corruption we've seen. Government corruption we haven't even seen yet. Yeah, I think that's what we're seeing, especially this week with all of this stuff happening with USAID is just the tip of the spear. I mean, there's just such a level of corruption and grift and fraud that's occurring with our tax dollars. It's unimaginable. Most people just can't even comprehend it. Here's a take from, I think this was just a small guy. I think I just saw this. I don't know if he's a large account, but yeah, I like what his take was. Tariffs are primarily a bargain chip to bring unfair actions of another country back into alignment and remove unfair trade practices. The idea isn't for it to be in place forever, just until the other country corrects its wrong. No need to panic. Just wait it out. So that's like kind of my response to James's take, was just that is like,
Yeah.
it's obviously not an optimal outcome to have more tariffs.
I agree with that very much, and the tool can be used.
Yeah.
in
It's a nonviolent.
non-economic
It's a
ways.
nonviolent tool to get.
It's a
minor
economic
concession.
statecraft.
Yeah,
Right.
Economic state. Yeah, that's the way I
Yeah.
like to look at it.
Economic force is the term Trump used when they asked him if he was going to annex Canada. If he
Yeah.
would use force, he said, not force, economic force. Okay, we'll see if this.
So
historically, it's not looking.
This is
too
pretty good. Secretary of State Marco Rubio just absolutely ripped the deep state slush fund known as USAID. I am the acting director of USAID. My frustrations with USAID go back to my time in Congress. It's a completely unresponsive agency. It's supposed to respond to policy directives of the State Department, and it refuses to do so. Every dollar we spend will be aligned with the national interest of the United States. USAID has a history of ignoring that and deciding that they're a global charity. These are not donor dollars. These are taxpayer dollars. Couldn't agree more.
Didn't what's the
Watch the clip. Play the
El
clip.
Salvador president Bukele, didn't he say something similar? He basically was like USAID is basically bullshit because, you know, the money comes here and 90% of it goes to, you know, folks in our country that don't need the money, that are already wealthy. It's, the money's not getting to where you think it is, or it's being
you're politically connected.
you know,
I mean,
used by U.S. economic hitmen to try to, you know, foster change of control and governments and regime shifts. And
we're funding the BBC, we're funding Politico. I mean, this shit is just wild. I mean, you know, like crazy what's happening. I think Trump, Elon cut off all of the funding for Politico or something like that, and then they can't pay any of their employees now. And they're doing regime change here and regime change there and propaganda here and propaganda there. It's like, it's wild what's been going on. I mean, you know, we shouldn't be funding the BBC propaganda and all these other news stations. I mean, this is a free market. You know, if they want to have a service, they better tell the truth and get people to actually pay for it. And taxpayers shouldn't be paying for it when we don't even know about it. I mean, that's wild. So in the future that I want to see is all of government spending completely public on a blockchain, right? Like, you can still have stuff that's like, oh, this is for like intelligence activities. So at least we know, like, we might not know what exactly it's going for, but we can be like, okay, they carved out $200 million for like, you know, the intelligence community. Like, okay, we can live with that. But what we can't live with is like, hey, we've never passed an audit. We have no idea where any of this money went. Oh shit, we're funding the Taliban over here and we didn't even know about it. It's craziness.
I love the Jesse Ventura idea that during the debates, all the candidates should have to wear NASCAR jackets with sponsors.
That's great. That's great. Oh, okay. Trump prosecutors. This is what I was telling you guys earlier. So all these fucking prosecutors who are fucking going after Trump, they're literally being funded by USAID. Trump prosecutors were funded by USAID. This push to prosecute Trump by Alvin Bragg, Soros was a minor co-funder. He gave them $10,000. That's it. The $14 million he gave to the parent company, the fiscal sponsor, FJP, Fair and Just Prosecution. I love how they have all these great names where they put these little organizations like, this is the Save the Puppies Act, when it's like slaughtering millions of them. Like, Fair and Just Prosecution,
STPA, actually.
A nonprofit that supports and influences progressive prosecutors in the U.S. Well, that ain't shit compared to the $27 million that USAID gave them. So, I mean, every time you hear the word Soros prosecutor, no, they're USAID prosecutors. This is absolutely insane that this is what's going on. So this guy, Mike Pence, has been fantastic. I mean, he's been talking about this for the past 2 years. I mean, it is like, he is just blowing the lid off this shit. It's finally getting into the actual ethos, and people are like actually finding out now that Elon and Doge got in there to see all this shit. Like, what the fuck is actually happening? And it is wild. You know, very wild. What do you got for us, Paul? Move us along here.
I thought there was an interesting take that you had added here about the Department of Education, and since there's discussion,
I know we've talked about this before. So massive increase in spending after the Department of Education was created with no actual improvement in education. So like, they just keep throwing more money at this thing, and student outcomes are actually going down. Yeah, look at this. They're not going up at all. There's been no change, nothing. Math scores, reading scores, science scores have literally gone down since they started doing this. And like, we've just seen the number of employees, the total cost, and it's just another example of the federal government absolutely failing at what they're doing. So I think they absolutely should end the Department of Education. They should punt this back to the states, let each state work on it, and then they can copy each other and figure out the way federalism was supposed to work. Hey, this state has like outsized outcomes. Let's copy what they're doing because it's fucking working. Instead, they're just punting money down the toilet, wasting our taxpayer dollars, and students are getting dumber. Literally,
and
like, not improving at all.
That's just K through 12. I mean,
Yeah,
imagine what's going on in the American universities.
That's a whole nother
These
grift and
sports
fraud.
franchises that are dabbling in economic pastime or academic pastimes.
Yeah,
Where, I mean, look where their budgets are going.
that's crazy.
Facilities, and I mean, you throw money at it. Where is this money actually going?
Yeah. So this is a funny one, funny little meme. So if we don't let athletes bet on games they have the ability to influence, why do we allow Congress to invest in companies they regulate? So I've always been like torn on this. Like I want people to be able to invest, but like, what do you guys think about this? Like, I mean, obviously they shouldn't be investing. Insider trading, and doing all this
congressional
shit.
insider trading is off the charts.
It's off the charts. Yeah, it's got to stop.
And it's almost like it's gotten so bad that we have to ban it because there's kind of no middle ground. I mean, whether it's the Pelosi stuff or just everybody. I mean, and I think.
So what's the off ramp? Like, if I served a political office, like, I wouldn't want to stop buying Bitcoin. Like,
no, you can own. You can
know
own.
what I mean?
You
Like,
can just. Well, I don't know.
so
about
how would
Bitcoin,
you-
But you
so
can
how
own
would
pa-
you
You can
do
own
that?
passive. You can just own passive ETFs that you're allowed to have exposure to a variety of different asset classes. I think the government has a retirement plan that for its workers, and so like you can. These are the certain ETFs. You could buy the S&P, you could buy the NASDAQ, you could buy this particular Bitcoin ETF or this particular and that's it.
But no active.
No
day trading.
no active day trading,
Yeah,
no
that
individual
makes sense to me.
stocks. And you know what? You know, you're serving your country, and that's, you know,
part of being a public servant.
and that's what it is. And then now the argument maybe is, oh, we're not going to attract the best people to Congress because they can't trade stuff. Like, we're already not attracting the best people to Congress, so I don't think that's a deterrent
Right,
necessarily.
and if that's the incentive to come to Congress, something's wrong.
Right. So, you know, but it's got to stop. These guys are in committees. They're making laws, and they're literally trading in companies that are affected by policies and committee hearings. I mean, it's wild. It's really it's completely out of control. It's completely out of control.
A couple years ago, I went up to Tallahassee to testify at the Capitol. We were trying to get rid of corporate welfare in the state of Florida. Sorry, get rid of corporate welfare in the state of Florida. And I went up there with a think tank, and we were very, you know, free market oriented, as you can imagine. And when I walked into the chambers, I'll never forget. All you saw were representatives from Marriott and Disney and Hilton and all these people who are throwing money at the government so that they can receive money back. And that just changed my entire opinion on what we were actually fighting. It's not necessarily these people, it's where they're getting the money from and the incentives that they there have. So if you take the incentives away, I agree.
Show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. I mean, it's very clear. Yeah, this was the bomb. This is where I got that take. I just saw someone say Nancy Pelosi should manage the new U.S. sovereign wealth fund, and honestly, I can't disagree. Yeah,
That's a satirical example of
That's
what
where I
we
got
just
that
said.
from.
You know,
Yeah.
Oh, is that where you got that from?
Yeah. That's classic. What do you guys think? What do you guys think about this idea of a U.S. sovereign wealth fund? I know a lot of other countries have a wealth fund and do all this stuff. You know, it in my mind, it seems better. I mean, obviously, you'd have to figure out some entitlement reform to maybe go with it or something. But you know, I'd rather definitely have my country owning actual valuable assets as opposed to like running a Ponzi scheme like Social Security. It doesn't have the money that I don't know. I
mean, most of the sovereign wealth funds around the world have been generated by excesses from trade, right? So we don't generate any excesses here from trade. I mean, Alaska has a sovereign wealth fund, right? I mean, Alaska has and that money gets from oil sales, and that gets funded back into payments that go to the Alaskan citizens. So we kind of have that example here.
Wyoming as well. I think Cynthia Lummis was talking about it the other day. She said that it's been a major success for them.
I mean, the U.S. government has a lot of assets that can be privatized, and you know, we can use that money, you know, to invest. I think one of the examples that Lutnick gave at the press conference was it would have been nice when we gave all this money to make masks here that the government took an equity piece in some of these businesses that made a shitload of money in America. And so there's some, you know, Trump has said, well, we'll invest in TikTok. I mean, what? So look, I mean, there's definitely, you know, some issues with it. How are we going to fund it? Where's the money going to come from? We're already, again, $36 trillion in debt. So are we going to privatize some assets to take that money to reinvest it in certain other things? I think the concept makes some sense. I think, you know, who's going to run it? Is it going to be a government employee? Is it going to be an outsourced board? I think Chamath put something out about who should run it. It should be an outsourced rotating board of folks that are from industry, that leave their industry, that come to the run this
I think
for
Chamath
a
had,
year
in the
or
All-In Pod, you listen to that. I agree with that take. I mean, I think if we're going to socialize the losses, if we're going to socialize a lot of this shit, the taxpayer damn better well get some of the upside.
There's been a lot of DARPA creations that have led to inventions that the U.S. government hasn't made any money off of. There's been a lot of biotech research that's led to drugs the U.S. government hasn't made any money off of. So I can understand taking equity ownership in certain types of speculative types of things in that regard, but. Again, where's the money going to come from? Does it fit with the budget? When we run
the taxpayers paying for it anyway, they should get some of the upside. That's
I thought it was a joke when I first read it. When I first read that we were going to move towards a sovereign wealth fund, I said a country that's $30 trillion in debt is now going to. and I'm going to take this back to the filter that I.
You got to watch this Howard Lutnick podcast, bro. It's so good. He's like, we're sitting on all these resources. Like, we got all this shit. We have all this oil. We have all this gold. We have all this shit. Like,
That's the problem. Is we're leaving it up again. If it's important, I don't want the federal government in charge of it. And again, I'm going to take that example. Why does the post office, which
why does the post office even exist?
Which operates a business that everyone needs,
and everything else,
right? So USPS and FedEx operated a $15 billion, or UPS and FedEx operated a $15 billion surplus, black surplus.
Yeah. So why
every year?
So why
USPS
do we even have
$5 billion in debt?
So why do we
year.
have the USPS? That's what I don't understand.
It's the same reason, and again, this might be my most controversial.
If UPS
take.
exists and FedEx exists, why do we have USPS? That's what I'm trying to understand. That why do they even exist?
It stems back to the Constitution because there is a line in there about the federal government should
educate me. Let's hear this.
The federal government should provide money for post roads, and so that has been interpreted through constitutional jurisprudence jurisprudence that means that the post office has a constitutional right to exist, which is absolute bullshit.
What
in
do
my
so you
opinion.
think it's bullshit? Okay.
Absolute bullshit.
Yeah.
It's a completely positivistic interpretation of what that was supposed to mean. Now, again,
So what did they mean? What do you think that? What do you like?
I think at the time you were on a horse and you had to get your love letter.
Yeah.
You know, your are you up to your side piece? So you needed some way to get that letter there, and so you needed roads. And so what they were saying was, oh, if we don't provide the roads, who's going to do it? Which FedEx and UPS have proven. Oh, if the government doesn't provide mail, somebody will.
Yeah,
and do it a lot better.
I think you're right.
I mean, other countries have had more positive success with their sovereign wealth funds, whether it be Norway or Saudi,
smaller.
UAE.
Yeah, a lot smaller.
But look, I agree with you. I mean, I think the issue is, are we hawking the family jewels to pay back the debt? I mean, and that's an issue, right? Are we gonna privatize all of I-95? Are we gonna sell all of our rare earth resources to and then what happens, right? Are we just gonna take that money and then keep spending it? So I don't know. I agree with you. Where's that money going to come from? I think is an important distinction, and we should really be focused on. We shouldn't be selling all the family jewels yet. We should be getting our house, and we shouldn't be using that to get our house. If we're not going to use that money to pay down the debt, then that's a big problem. We got to pay down the debt. We got to get our house in order. And if we're going to use privatizing of government assets to do it, I'm okay with it. But if we're just going to take that money and then go reinvest it in other shit, I don't know if I'm okay with it.
So just to your point about 75, right? A great thought experiment. You guys can take this and run with it. But if we were to privatize 75, why don't we just have it paid for by the people who put the billboards up? Why don't we call it the Dunkin' Donuts Highway or the whatever Amazon Expressway or whatever, and then they have to take care of it. And then the money that they get from either the tolls or whatever else goes back towards balancing the budget. I think that's a great idea.
I like that idea too a lot. I love that idea. All right, Paul. Let's do one more. I think we've gone over two hours here, so
Yeah, you guys have been cooking.
we could go all night. But I'm sure everybody.
there is quite a few takes left. I'll let you decide which one you want to touch on.
I'm going to add more. We can save some for Friday. So just you can leave the tabs up for the Friday, and anybody who's here now is welcome to come back and be on Friday as well.
Sounds good. So guys, if you want to touch on this one, feel free. Let me show you some other options.
Let me just touch on this one. I'll finish this one up because this is one of my favorite things that's happened. This. I think this is little Elizabeth Warren's little slush fund scam. This Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Trump has fired Rohit Chopra, director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. He embodied the worst excesses of the administrative state, an unaccountable bureaucrat wielding regulatory power like a cudgel against American businesses and financial institutions. His tenure was marked by aggressive overreach, weaponizing regulation to impose a progressive economic agenda that stifled innovation, reduced consumer choice, and burdened small lenders with crushing compliance costs. Rather than fostering a competitive market, he used the CFPB as a political tool to punish industries that didn't align with leftist orthodoxy, undermining the free market principles that drive American prosperity. His disdain for due process and preference for rule by fiat made him an unelected economic czar, choking economic growth under the guise of consumer protection. By firing Chopra, Trump is striking a blow against the deep state's regulatory stranglehold, restoring accountability, and freeing the economy from ideological interference. I love that quote. I love that whole post. What do you guys think?
Good riddance.
Good riddance. Yeah, I think I'm so sick of being treated like a child. We are fucking grown adults. People make bad decisions. You learn from your decisions. You move on. I mean, that's just part of life, right? In order to be an adult, a contributing member of society, you have to bear some level of personal responsibility. And I think as a society, we've gotten so far to this point that we need to be protected from everything. It's no. People can fucking fail. Shit happens. You figure it out. People, your friends, your family, whoever builds you up, brings you back up, and or you bring yourself back up, right? That's part of the human experience. And I think all this total nonsense about having no personal accountability, no personal responsibility, and not even letting failure to occur, whether it's in our markets, whether it's with our people, whether it's with it makes a weaker society. And I think we've come to that point in society where there's so much weakness and so much just excess of fraud and abuse and propaganda and nonsense, that it's time to get back to being a free citizen in a free society where there are consequences for making bad decisions. That's part of life. You learn from them and you move on and you grow, right?
Amen.
I think this gets to your point about giving the government power and they generally will fuck it up. I think when Warren created this, right, there was noble intention behind creating this bureau, right? And there was
The road to hell has been paved on the best of intentions.
exactly, right? And so she had a thought, right? And I'm trying to help people. They're getting fucked by various companies, banks, whatever it is, and what winds up happening is money got involved in that bureau and money and power, and all of a sudden there's fraud.
Well, and this is bad, and that is good. The subjective decision making of what goes and what doesn't go has been a huge part of Choke Point 2.0. It's like, well, why is this bad? Back to my point of why is consuming energy bad? Just in a vacuum. Like, why not have a conversation? Or we talked about this before. Anytime that everybody should be able to have a conversation, and they can make their points, but it needs to be rooted in logic.
Yeah.
When you just come out here and say, well, that's bad. Energy consumption is bad. What the fuck are you talking about? Back it up.
I agree with you.
I am though concerned that the consumers who originally were supposed to be helped by, let's say, this organization, and like who is looking out for them still? I'm still a little bit concerned that with what we're doing here with Doge and what we're doing, like we're still going to wind up leaving a lot of people behind.
Right.
And I'm not sure that there's a lot of thought being given, to that. And as the government retrenches in size, and we start firing, this voluntary buyout of all the federal government workers, which is 20,000 workers, we'll probably get up to at least 100,000 workers, or so. And there's going to be a lot more layoffs. What is going to happen to these folks, right? After they get their 6 months of severance, whatever it is, are they going to? I think the thought is that they're going to compete in the private economy now. Are these workers that are fired from federal government jobs, are they going to be able to compete in the private economy? Are there going to be jobs for these people in the private economy where AI is ramping up further and taking more jobs away from, these are, white collar jobs, let's say they're back office jobs or administrative jobs. They're ripe for technology, right? They're ripe for AI. They're ripe to get completely replaced. So more and more folks are going to be removed from the public payroll and the private payroll. What is going to happen to them? Are we reskilling them? Are we training them? Are we going to be, improving unemployment insurance? Are we moving to a place where UBI is actually necessary in the society? I don't think that this administration, or even the last administration, is giving much thought to some of these longer term issues about employment in this country. I think there's a hope that, tariffs and manufacturing jobs, we're just going to put all these people to work in the plant, right? But the reality is we're not, right? We're going to build plants here. They're going to be heavily robotic, technology driven with robots. And so, are we giving a lot of thought to the segments of society that are being left behind? I am concerned about that. I don't think I don't think the right does a good job on that. I think the left does a better job thinking about them. Yeah. Their solutions haven't been great.
I mean,
but I am concerned about that, and
we're just living in two different worlds, though, man. Like I'm watching these people on TikTok, like, how dare Donald Trump tell me I have to go back to the office? I can't just be at home all day, like crying on thing. There's hundreds of these people and Reddit swarming. It's like we're living in two different realities. Like, that's a different world, like a different, like you're living in like La La Land. You're living in fake land, like not living in real life. I feel like, right? For many of us entrepreneurs who are working in real, society, where we actually have to provide value to get compensated for that, right? It's just it's a totally different reality. I would say
that's a tough one. I mean, maybe there's an opportunity for the free market to create some sort of, like skill-based, I think like a boot camp, right? Like some people, I know people, you're trying to switch jobs, you want to get into technology. There's like boot camps. People create boot camps. This is a really micro out there example, but the boot camps are there because you've got a workforce that wants to learn a skill so they can contribute to the new economy. That person still needs to take the initiative to get there. But as long as you have this workforce and these people are hungry and want to work, somebody will create an on-ramp for them to get the skills to contribute to the new economy. That's the hopeful thought. I think that's a little wishful thinking, but
such a level of coddling that exists in these people's minds that it's just two different realities.
Kind of like psychologically, fear is a bigger motivator than gain. And these people have had their job, which is gain, and it's been very, let's just fly with this, a little easy or whatnot. But now the job's taken away. You're actually deeply psychologically more incentivized to avoid pain, and you'll do what you can to avoid pain. And I think it's just going to like root human. Now, is there going to be a lot of casualties as a part of that? Yes, but
I think
Just go back to base psychology.
Craig, I think he does raise a good point that the left has done a better job of thinking about how can we help these people than maybe the right has historically. And I think Trump has gotten his message through to a lot of the lower middle class people, and that was evident in his landslide victory this time around. But I think you are right. There has to be some thought there. And the first thing that comes to my mind is obviously the money is broken, right? Which is why we're in the space we're in, because we're passionate about that. We can see hey, when you've got a politically connected group of insiders printing money, giving it to all their cronies at the top, they get the first money first, and then they get to lend it out and do all this other shit. They debase the little man, the poor people. We've got this massive wealth inequality, separation that has been occurring. We're witnessing it in real time. You're talking about it. That in my mind all flows back to fixing the money. No person or entity should be able to just artificially print new units and steal from the rest of society. That's my take on that, right? So as long as that's allowed to continue, you're going to see that wealth inequality increase. And I think that's evident if you look at the data, right?
There's an uncomfortable conversation that's not being had.
I'm sorry, Maddie. We have a
What's
call
up?
with Dominic Frisbee right now.
Oh, right
Should
now.
I just buzz him into the live stream?
Sure, buzz him on in. Buzz
All
him
right,
in.
you guys continue. I'm
Can
gonna
you
try
buzz
to tap
Dominic
him
in? All right,
I
tap
don't see
him
why
in.
not.
I didn't know we had to call them right now, but buzz him in.
Hey,
Okay.
if you're gonna
Oh, hit the head. Yeah, I mean we were jamming.
But what I was saying was there's an uncomfortable conversation that needs to be had about the collateral damage of not only abolishing certain federal agencies or federal jobs, but also the technologicalization of certain industries. I mean, if you think about the number one industry in America right now, or the number one job in the job sector, is trucking, driving trucks.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's all talked about the autonomous vehicles and autonomous trucking becoming a thing in the next 20, 30 years.
It's coming. I mean, it's almost here.
What are you going to do with these people who that's all they've ever known? And I think it hits the nail on the head is what it brings my mind back to is the Luddites. When the Industrial Revolution came about and people were seeing that their factory jobs were being given to machines, there was the impetus to start beating the machines and blaming them. But then at some point, there has to be some sort of transfer.
Throughout history, we've had technological change, and
What happens is actually more jobs.
Right, and people have always said there's more
historically.
jobs, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
concerned.
it's like when you went from horses to cars. You had somebody taking care of the horses, but now all of a sudden you've got a car and all these unique parts and all these different things.
Right.
And now we've got gasoline and people need to pump the gas, and so society has always evolved.
I'm worried.
that way.
I'm concerned about saying this, but I am worried that this time is different.
Really?
with respect to AI,
Interesting.
with respect to AI.
I've heard this a
And-
lot from a lot of different people.
The other thing
Yeah.
I'm concerned about is, look, the folks that are losing their 6-figure software jobs, that those are not going to be replaced with 6-figure jobs. They're going to be replaced with maybe 5-figure landscaping jobs or something else. Those folks have debt. Those folks have mortgages, credit card debts. The banking system is basically built on this. And so if we start to destroy these higher paying jobs and we have deflation in wages, it's really a threat to the current banking system, the way that the fiat money system is set up. And so governments and banks are not going to allow the destruction of the banking system. They're just going to print more money. And so ultimately,
Buy Bitcoin.
I mean, it's probably how this is, will wind up, being fixed. But displacing these high, before the displacement of labor was blue collar labor. Now we're talking about really for the first time, potentially mass displacement of white collar labor. Lawyers, accountants.
but my job is-
and bankers and software engineers and the like.
But
So
the thing is, so what people come to me, I get a large swath of people who come and say, well, I tried this on Rocket Lawyer, or I tried this on LegalZoom, and I made the document, and then I tried to enforce it, and then I have to fix their fuck ups.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then I start to make money off that. And we've seen it, especially with AI,
Yeah.
where AI, the other day I put in, I need case law regarding this. AI just created these cases.
It
They
just
do
made
not
shit up.
exist.
Yeah, that was a big thing on this. Some guy in
do not
the
exist.
some guy went to court. Some guy lost his he like got his license got revoked from the bar because he used AI to like generate case law, and the AI hallucinated all these fake cases.
But my paralegal, he's in law school, and they're teaching how
Yeah.
to use legal search engines and legal AI
Mhm.
to kind of combat that. And so
Yeah.
I had to go to him because I didn't know anything about it. Right? I'm from the generation where we use books. Right?
Yeah.
And so I see there's a transfer that's occurring both and again I bring it back to education,
Mhm.
that it's going to have to happen from the ground up. But to your point about where these people are currently, the people who are truckers, the people who are in government bureaucracy jobs, what are they going to transfer their skills to is a good question.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the other side of this one. I actively have people that work for me that are using AI now to be way more productive and do way more than they would before.
Yeah.
But yeah, with the caveat, like you said, that this is by no means a panacea. That does hallucinate. It does make mistakes. We're not quite there yet with the AGI. That is coming probably, right? So I think jobs will be displaced, but also there will be more efficient. People will be able to do more with less in a lot of ways. So,
I agree.
and hopefully new jobs will be created.
I live in a college town, and I play on a hockey team with some college guys. And I asked them, he was doing homework, writing a paper as we were driving to a game, and I'm like, "What is it like with AI there?" And so they've got all these rules, regulations, the checks you can do. There's policing it, and so on and so forth. Like, well, these tools are available to everybody, and they're going to become more and more available, and they're going to become more and more and more intelligent. So, you actually think you should be in a position where you should be teaching people to leverage these tools because it's available
I'm
to you.
probably going to
Why
have to
not?
talk to my kids' school about this because they're like, we don't want you using any AI. We don't want.
Right.
It's like,
Like the
I'm
calculator.
telling my kid like, dude, you need to be using this in everything you do. You need to figure it out. I'm not like, don't cheat. Don't like use it to like cheat, but like use it to like check your work and like explain to you why you were wrong. Like, and
'Cause these
like a lot of
tools-
these will save the conversation. So I said, look, if you need to use, like, I want you to use the AI. If there's a problem, like I will go to the school and tell him, hey, I told him to do this, and like I'll save the conversation. So the output of like how he got to the result was like, look, I will go to bat for you and say like, hey, I told you to do this, and here, it's not cheating. Look, you can follow the conversation of, don't write my essay for me, but hey, I wrote this. I told him, he's like writing this. I'm like, dude, put it in there and say, help me fix any grammar mistakes and explain what I did wrong. So like,
to your point, the
yeah.
people who aren't doing that are going to get left
are going to be
behind.
left behind. Yeah, exactly.
You're not leveraging the
Yeah.
tools that are
Yeah.
available to you, and thereby you're going to be less efficient.
And you're going to
than
be
you could
needed.
be.
Like I have all my employees. Like you have, like if you work for me, if you do anything, it's like you need to have a company access account to these different AI tools, Anthropic or ChatGPT or Venice or any of them, right? We use this actively.
Eric Voorhees and Jordan Peterson have some interesting comments on that, and they essentially want to have specialized AI that's trained to act as a tutor. Where
Khan
essentially
Academy
it's-
is already doing this with
exactly. He was talking about that.
Oh, he was. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
where it's not,
Yeah.
it's not hallucinating. It's specifically trained on a certain archive of factual information.
Yeah.
Right. So it's tailored to be a personalized tutor essentially, and in that way, it can be an aid rather than a crutch.
Yeah.
Right? But hey, Dominic Frisbee, unfortunately, apparently our call was at 7:30, so we rescheduled for tomorrow.
Oh, okay. All
So
right.
if
No
you
worries.
do want to wrap it up,
How did I not know about this? This is
dude, how did I know? John apparently scheduled
Did
it.
he?
He didn't. Yeah. So it's all
Was this
good.
for
We're gonna do
the
it
Twitter
tomorrow.
Spaces?
This is just to discuss the upcoming space tomorrow.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So this was a last minute thing you did. All right, boys. Well, this has been a hell of a conversation, and I hope you guys come back on Friday.
This has been great.
Yeah, we'll wrap there. Awesome.
Good stuff.
All right. Yeah.
All right.
2.5 hours. Fuck.
That went by fast.